Fellow humans, Master Dinner Flights here, bringing you the low-quality content you deserve. And today, it's time. It's time that we talk about this very interesting trap card in the room. It is Labrynth. So, however many days ago, I made a quick combo of Labrynth showing off the new trap. And I'll get into it once we get in the deck profile, which, if you've read the title, you know what that is, but I don't trust your ability to read sometimes. But basically, I'm just going to get straight to the point. By the simple addition of one other playable spell and trap in the deck, this deck's playstyle fundamentally changed. And I don't mean that as a joke. I mean, this is something I'd never thought I would ever see before. But let's get into it. So right now I want to give a quick demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and start off. I'm going to activate Coup Clock. I'm looking at my hand, and I'm deciding what play I want to make. So I'm going to activate Coup Clock, which, I don't know if I said this in the last video, but I'm going to say it now. This card went from virtually unplayable to one of the coolest cards ever. And I'm going to show you why. So, I'm going to activate Coup Clock. It's going to go to the grave, discard it, and then I'm going to change the dragon one, which is one of the two pieces of furniture. And with that, we are going to set Big Welcome Labrynth. Now, Coup Clock has some interesting effects when you discard it. You can discard it, and then, while a Labrynth monster is face up on the field, you can activate one trap card during the turn it's set. So basically, if you discard it, after resolution, if there's any time where a Labrynth monster is face up, any traps at this turn can just be activated ahead of schedule. Which, originally, I thought was not good an effect, and to be fair, it wasn't a good effect until much later. Which I'm going to show this much later. But it has another effect, like the normal furniture, where it has the ability to recycle itself. But unlike the other furniture, where they want a trap to take a monster off the board, this one says, if a normal trap or Labrynth card effect takes a Labrynth card out of your hand, which is what all the other furniture does, or like Paleozoic Diomiscus, all those things like that, you can either add this card back to your hand or special summon it. We are going to special summon it. So here's what we have. We have a Labrynth monster face up and a trap that was set this turn. So let's take this to its logical conclusion. We are going to activate Big Welcome Labrynth, and we are going to summon the original lady, and then bounce the clock back to our hand. Now, because a normal trap took a monster off the board, Lady will trigger to take a card away from our opponent, and the furniture, if it's the stove, it'll special summon itself, and if it's not, we get to add it to our hand. One final thing I should say. You were going second. This didn't matter whose turn it was. This was a hand trap interaction, and all you needed to open was Coup Clock and one of the furnitures. And at this resolution, we get to break our opponent's play. We get to have a Big Welcome Labrynth that if they don't clear this, we just get to bounce another thing, which, you know, pops another thing, so we get to take two more cards away from our opponent. We have another trap we get to set for free with Lovely Lady. And we have a Coup Clock and furniture for the next turn. And then we still have the original cards in hand. We have a 2-card hand trap interaction that nets you, doesn't take away a single card from you. This is literally the exact same thing we were doing. This is what Konami has been doing, and I'm going to just start calling these archetype-based hand traps. They've existed before, but not at the level they do now. I want to say the very first true example was Edgemp Scythe, because all the others are like the weird negators like Morgan of Noble Knights and the Subterror Fiendus. Those aren't actual hand traps because they don't interrupt the opponent. They're just cards and they're not really functional hand traps in stopping the opponent and like disrupting their plays. Whereas these cards are, like Havness is, and Edgem Scythe is. And I'm going to give you a really hot take that I know goes against the grain of many other players. I think this is literally the best game design decision Konami has ever made. I think the generic hand trap problem we've been having has had a lot of consequences that players who have already been playing the game don't notice. But it is, I'm going to say this right now, there is not a single extra deck mechanic that is as gatekeepy to players who want to learn the game than hand traps are. Because hand traps not only are never communicated through game rules or introduced as a very large and valid mechanic that they are, but even then, you can't deck build against hand traps the same way you do any other card type. So it's such a massive learning curve that new players struggle very hard with, and Konami has made no communication whatsoever. And because hand traps seem to be immune to the ban list outside of Max C that one time, it's just very hard for new players to get around it. And if it's going to be a prominent game mechanic from now on, there needs to be change. And I think this is the superior change. Because for one, it's not cookie cutter. It's not the same 3 Ash, 3 Ogre, 3 Veiler in every deck. Instead, you are using active engine cards and using your own deck building to proactively interrupt the opponent. While at the same time, you're not you're not like deviating from what your actual play style is. So no matter how many people like to complain about Havness, I think the actual complaint is that it's Tier Lament and not that Havness is an archetype based hand trap. I think we need more cards like that. I think this is the best approach to go to this kind of stuff. But this is a massive rant meant for another time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this deck, Labrynth, because we've got a lot to say about this. Now, this deck list is probably a bit overwhelming if you've been playing the deck for the past few months, because this is a huge deviation from what you see normally. And I'll explain why this is actually just right now, because when we think of a trap deck in Yu-Gi-Oh, we think it's just a small supplement engine to like this back row or stun strategy. This is the inverse. This is the first time in Yu-Gi-Oh history where you want to see more Labrynth cards. You want to see more engine cards in your trap deck than generics, which is not something that I don't think any other trap deck has ever done. In Altergeist, if you open 4 Altergeist cards, they better be exactly what you need, because it's very rare that that benefits you. If you open 4 Eldritch cards, you're probably going to lose, because there's only like 1 to 2 valid disruptions you could possibly have. Whereas this one, if I open green, furniture, clock, and Labrynth, my hand is absolutely insane. My hand is nuts. I am going to town. And let's break down why this is. Basically, because of this new kind of flip-floppy, tossed around all the furniture kind of playstyle that this one card introduced, just by being the third name the deck needed in the spell and trap department, there's a lot of valid reason to proactively trigger your stuff regardless of the turn. And because of that, like the furniture and all these like supply and support cards actually get to matter immediately. Because when you put it in context of like Eldritch, you definitely want to see the Eldritch engine to keep as the support engine for your floodgates or back row. This is the exact opposite. Your generics instead are the supplement to your engine. And because of that, this is like the first time, and any time I can think of, where it's a trap deck that just wants to see its engine cards. And that's insane. Now, let me get into this right now, and I'll explain some things later, because you're probably seeing 3 green and 3 pink, and you're probably rolling your eyes and thinking that's overkill, and that's totally expected. And to be fair, I don't think 3 pink is necessary, but I definitely would do at least 2. But the reason I'm saying this is because if you draw too many normal summons, it just means you're tossing them with your furniture. And you might think, well, you're not tossing them with Backjack, which a lot of people normally do. And I'll get into that later. But basically, you just want to see as many of your engine cards as possible. So with green, both of its effects are tied to the same ones per turn. So if you search, you can't get the draw. Whereas pink, it isn't. But you have to make a payment for its effect. And while that could be bad normally, because of how incredibly searchable and settable Big Welcome Labrynth is, it actually doesn't matter about all this. And more importantly, that Big Welcome Labrynth itself lets this card dodge Imperm Veiler. Because even if they hit it with a Veiler Imperm at the cost, this is at the graveyard at that time, so you just bounce it, it resolves, you get green, and do whatever. So even if they try to hit it with one of those, it's fine. So they either have to hit it prior to you activating anything, or they have to have, like, specifically Ash or, I guess, Gamma. Which, both of those are kind of iffy to begin with. And if they're using an Ash on, like, this interaction, it probably means they won't have it for one of your actual plays on their turn. So that's fine anyways. But yeah, we got 3 green, 3 pink. While it is a lot of normal summons, you gotta remember that clumping up on normal summons doesn't matter as long as you have, like, any way to discard them, which is, like, this entire deck. I'm not even joking. So we got 3 of each furniture. These 2 cards are the exact same card, except green adds itself back to hand when a trap takes a monster off the field, and the orange one summons itself instead. And both of which, this is interesting. Because this card was bad. And I firmly believe it was bad in the same way that the original playstyle with Backjack I also found bad. Because you wanted to, in the earlier list, it was a normal trap deck. You wanted to see some engine cards, but really you needed a lot of generics to get you through the game. Where now it's the inverse. Where now you want to really have all these engine cards, and generics could be backup support. And because of that, the acceleration of Coup Clock gets to matter way more. Where you could have done things with it in the past, but it wasn't really worth it, this is actively worth it every time you can, and that is mainly because of Big Welcome not just being an extra target, but just how the card functions in general. Because of the fact that it does a much better job of triggering Silver Castle than a regular Welcome Labrynth does, it means Coup Clock actually gets to have its real functionality as a hand trap, as I showed earlier, rather than just an accelerant which doesn't get you very far prior to Big Welcome. And because of that, it's actually very good. Originally I thought, man, this is just a one of you definitely play. Now I'm thinking, what if you go 2 or 3 and this replaces the role of Backjack? And like I said, I'll get into these 2 later, but basically, where originally you wanted to open a piece of furniture in Backjack, now there's actual merit to just opening a piece of furniture and Coup Clock, and Coup Clock has the benefit of actually being an in-engine card, where you get to benefit heavily from that. So yeah, that's it. Definitely considering 2 or 3. The only downside is if you don't have anything that can use this, it's really bad. Which is why I'm thinking probably 2 is the best, even though maybe 3. And then here's another point of interaction I want to mention that could make a hand trap, is that it's Lady of the Labyrinth. This is a 3 of, and I think this is much better at getting to generics than Backjack is. And the reason I say that is because it gets you the exact card you want better than Backjack and better than Lilith. Unlike prior, how do I put it? Basically, because this can get to generics on any point, and sometimes during turn 1 with Coup Clock interactions, both of these cards are made questionable at best, despite the fact that I don't think they're 0-ofs anymore, but I do think there's a lot more to take into account, and these will be a lot more situational flex spots than actual necessities like they used to be. because another interaction you can create on a turn 0 hand trap is if you open a furniture, a big welcome, and Lady of the Labyrinth, you can toss the big welcome and the furniture and then chain Lady of the Labyrinth because you used the Labyrinth effect at this turn. Plop it down, set like a welcome, and the big welcome can compulse whatever play they have. And I think that's a pretty solid play. Not only are you summoning a 29 defense wall that's immune to targeting or destruction because you're setting a back row, but in addition, you get to compulse on command, and that's a lot to deal with. Basically, they're going to lose some unless they have specifically a Super Poly interaction to deal with, but like, Super Poly is past the point where we can even consider playing around it. You can't actually play around it, they just need to ban the card, and it's up to them to see if they actually do it or not. But like, if anyone makes fun of whatever reason you not playing around Super Poly, just remember that's not a real thing. The only way it could be a real thing is if you're doing a win more play anyway, but like, playing around Super Poly isn't a thing anymore. I'm sorry, that's not a thing anymore. But veering off the point, this is like multiple different turn 0 hand trap interactions you can create. And then when you consider you can do like Imperm, you don't need to run any real hand traps besides these, because you already have the levels of interruption you need to, and this deck can heavily snowball card advantage when needed. So because of that, you don't need to run some like goofy crap like Ash Blossom and Gamma when you could just play more of your cards. And because of that, that's why there's so many monsters in this deck. There's 18 monsters, 6 of which are normal summons, 1 of which is a double tribute summon. But because there's so many ways to get this out, because Big Welcome can summon it from anywhere, that's huge. It's actually, it's big. Yeah, Silver Castle is insane. The Big Welcome is what allows it to shine much more than it did originally, because before Big Welcome was announced, my true theory on Labrynth, because it was so dependent on generics, I was thinking maybe 3 ladies, 3 Lilith, and some like support monsters, and then just call it a day and sit on 30-something trap cards. And to be fair, it was actually playing better than regular Labrynth until this card is announced. And this card is just kicking dickin', and it's insane. But now, let's go to the last of the engine cards, and I'll just say the rest of these are flexible whatevers, truthfully. What I've noticed is that the normal Welcome Labrynth you absolutely want to play, but there is no value of it being at any more than 1 in your deck. Because it has the ability to reset itself over time, and in addition, when you're wanting to actually get new monsters out, Big Welcome is usually a better version of that. This card, like, you definitely want it once, and then, like, even if it gets banished, you're fine because you still have an alternative. And if it doesn't, it's a recycling resource, so you don't even have to worry about losing it. Like, you're losing out on its effect. But if anything, I found the actual field spell to be more valuable because of that. Because if they out this, that is a resource that is, like, gone, and you have an effect that you no longer have access to. Whereas losing out on this, you're not actually losing out on, like, an effect like it, whereas this, you absolutely are. So I found that 3 big, 2 field, 1 original is pretty synergetic with what's going on here. And then this card is Exodia. This card, definitely flexible with anything else, but I think if you still want to go like Backjack Lilith plays, you'll probably just want to play this anyways. It gives this deck a lot of high value targets to send, and even though it can like get hit with Ash, who cares? It takes a card and pays for itself by taking a card. Ash Blossom just made that situation even easier to think about. Overroot. Like, all these traps, I'll say, are just whatever you want them to be. Definitely consider traps that take cards off the board, because that's what your deck needs. And it can be a massive range of whatever. So the only actual traps I would recommend are, like, these 10, because this card's absolutely insane. I think if you have a deck that can play this, play this. And then everything else, just, like, keep in mind what has synergy with your deck and how you want to approach a current meta whenever we get this. And then the final 2 cards I want to mention are Lilith and Backjack. So, everyone goes down the Backjack route with this deck originally pre-big and pre-whatever. I didn't find that to be very good because of the fact that it created a layer of variance that this deck didn't benefit from, and in addition, it played into a playstyle that was inherently built on redundancy, where you max out on all this furniture and all these searches for the exact two same cards, that it itself was like a 2-card combo to Trident, which wasn't that good. And even when you threw Backjack into the equation, it just created a variance chance of getting a generic, even if it's not particularly the one you want. So in that original playstyle, I found that Lilith was better because not only could it be a starter in the same way that Green was for Welcome Labyrinth, but it could get to anything else. And you got it targeted because you got to choose the options between a 3. But now, I would say neither of these are that important. Because Backjack, while it does benefit you much better in this furniture-heavy lineup, the problem is that unlike other situations, like that situation I just shown off, if Backjack was thrown into that equation and you, tossed it with the furniture, it doesn't have an effect. Because basically the only situation where it would have mattered is you have to, go out of your way to stack it, and how do I put it? It throws even a bigger variance curveball into that exact equation where you could have just not accounted for it. It doesn't give you more generics than you didn't already need. And while it could have hit something very good like an Ice Dragons or whatnot, it also could have not done that. And that's a layer of variance that I don't think particularly makes it worth it, where you could play around this whole variance wing, especially since you're going a furniture-heavy route. But let's take it to the inverse, where what if a furniture had to discard a big welcome, which is something I account for a lot. Then the Backjack's just going to sit there. And that's the worst thing you want it to do, because Backjack, if it's going to sit there, it might as well be Lilith. And I still wouldn't recommend that either. So honestly, since you're no longer dependent on generics and slow grindy plays, you don't need Lilith in the same way that I was playing it earlier. But at the same time, because you're actually having valid discard outlets and very proactive plays and less dependent on generics, Backjack also doesn't fill that role. So honestly, you could probably play neither of these and be fine. But if I'm going to recommend one now, it would actually be based on how you're going to build your deck. And if you want to go the hand trap heaviest route possible, I would recommend Backjack, but I would look at every possibility of making Backjack as live as possible, and I would do it without compromising your actual deck build. And if you go the Lilith route, I would say that would only ever be because you have a normal trap that you've decided is integral to your deck list, like a Dimensional Barrier, DDG, Virus, whatever, and you need to guarantee it. And Lilith would be better because even though it's a normal summon, these cards are made to summon it out of hand. So even then, it just wouldn't matter. So that's my point on these two. So if you're wondering which one you should choose upcoming on this, it could be neither, but those would be the opportunities of you to decide if you want to go with one. And for the side deck, it's empty. For the extra deck, you actually get to use this way more proactively now. You get to make a lot more proactive plays. So here's some cards I would recommend. In the quick combo I did whenever, you can go this DDD route. I think it's actually pretty good. Someone told me this card exists. I forgot it existed. Yeah, you get to get 3 suck-offs instead of 2. Evil Swarm Nightmare. I was testing this out when I was testing Shade Brigadine. It's cool. It's not Abyss Dweller, which is not on my deck list for some reason, but keep that in mind. And then Exciton Knight, I actually think is very important in this deck list because it's a Fiend. It's basically Zeus that you can summon when you're Fiend locked, which is quite a bit. So I would definitely keep this in mind. You're locked out of damage, but who cares? That's basically what Zeus was going to do anyway. You attack with some random do-nothing XC, and then you make Zeus, which is not different from you skipping your damage that turn, really. And then rank 8s. So the only ones I would truly recommend are like Ding Girsu and maybe a turn 1 disruption one like 38. But I would also look around at Zombie Stein. You can summon this with in-engine cards. It's just a targeting Omni Negate, which is pretty rare. So it's like cool. Not particularly great. And then Felgrand, it's definitely worse, but this is the only rank 8 in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That is a disruption that can also proactively detach materials. And that actually matters a lot if you have the field up and you want to get one of them out from under it. So that's something to keep in mind. News Reporter is an insane card in any Fiend deck not named Burning Abyss. So that's pretty cool. Nightmare Phoenix, it's a Fiend. This one is a Fiend. This is here for emotional support. Gloomy, he's edgy, and then Nightmare Unicorn. You could go some other Fiends. You could go Access Code by... If you're going Access Code, you probably had game without it. So it's actually, sometimes, I'm going to blow your mind, but if you don't need Access Code, you don't actually have to play it. And that's basically what this is. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I might put 1 or 2 replays in here, or I might not at all. You'll find out in like a minute. But yeah, that's what I have to say about this deck list, and it's actually super fascinating. This is the most proactive trap deck I've ever seen in my entire life, and it's really confirming my suspicion that Konami has finally figured it out. The TCG banned Red Reboot, and the OCG started hitting Lightning Storm, and we started getting some really insane normal traps and normal trap support. The truth is, players for many years have been asking for more back row removal to deal with the floodgates, but despite the fact that in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now you have access to more back row removal than you have ever had, the floodgate issue is as bad as it's ever been, which means the truth is, the back row removal isn't the solution, and if anything, it's causing a reverse issue, where because we don't have any valid back row decks to keep floodgate nonsense in check, combo decks just get to run them without any kind of format-based check. So basically, the only thing all this back row removal is actually doing is invalidating back row-based control decks, while not dealing with the floodgate problem. And I think they finally figured out that's what's really going on. And if you want to know the solution, Farfa's already said it 13 trillion times. It's ban floodgates. You don't solve that problem doing anything else. You don't print a card to make a solution. You get rid of the problem. That's how you get rid of these like floodgate strategies, is by banning the floodgates. You could print 17 red reboots and those floodgate problems will still exist. The only thing you do is you make collateral damage in the process. And now that they figured that out, I'm excited to see where this goes. And I'm excited that we've got a trap deck as proactive as this, because this is really fucking cool. But yep, that's about it. Thank you all for watching. And remember, Master Dinnerflex will take your soul.
Choose your fighter. Lightning inspired. Fight.